All right, what's up, Boonies? I'm Austin,
I'm Moriah,
and
and
we're
we're
the
the Boones.
Boons. And welcome to our very first podcast
Number
of
one.
Boone Voyage, a clever play off of Bon Voyage.
Yeah, so we picked Boone Voyage because I think it sounds funny. But at first I was like, isn't that a phrase for goodbye? So looking into it, it technically means good voyage or good journey. And so, kind of the point behind that is we're taking you on this journey of our marriage that is good and is going to be good and give you a behind the scenes insight on that.
Yeah, exactly. So our goal is to work on our marriage, and we'll kind of get into why a little bit later. We kind of have a script that we'll go off of, but really, this is mainly like we were talking about before this. Like, this is mainly a conversation between us that we were like, you know what, we don't have it figured out.
Nope.
Even 13, 14 months in, we probably won't have it figured out 13, 14 years in. But we figured let's invite people in to watch and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you're learning about marriage from people or when you're listening to people talk about it, you get almost more of a finished product. And there's not a lot out there on what is it like when you're in the nitty gritty and the unpleasant and the hard and trying to navigate what that's like. And so
In the pit.
in the pit, which you'll get into, I'm sure. But we're excited to take this opportunity and to talk through it. And I don't know, in my head, no one's listening because that helps me not be nervous. So
In my head, there's a couple million, so maybe we'll land somewhere in between. So kind of the why behind a podcast. So I was at a conference this past weekend for EX3, put on pretty much by Forrest and his mentor, his life coach, whatever you want to call it, Garrett White. I caution you in looking him up. Um,
especially around young listeners.
yeah. But he has done wonders for over, I believe, 65,000 men and helping them what he calls wake up. So he runs Wake Up Warriors. So anyway, at this conference, um, kind of the first couple of major takeaways for me were all about being honest. Like, that's the first thing. He came into the room, and I think I told you this. Like, he came into the room and he was like, "You're all liars," and like, I mean, you could hear a pin drop. And he was like, "And if you don't think you're a liar, you're the biggest liar in the room and the most dangerous person in the room at the moment." And I think that hits a lot of people like a ton of bricks. And he went into, and I'm sure you've heard lies of commission and omission,
Mm-hmm.
lies that you commit, lies that you actually speak. Um, like if you're like, "Hey, did you go register your car like I've been telling you to for the past couple of weeks?" And I was like, "Yeah," like, boom, blatant lie.
Yeah, you know you're
Um,
lying.
but then I think it's the lies of omission
Mm-hmm.
that are slowly sinking marriages, and that's the lies that we are not telling, the truth that we're withholding. And so that was one of the big takeaways. And we'll kind of get into that in a second. And then the other was like, you have something to say, but you need to start talking. And I think Mariah hit on that. Like, we don't want to wait until 10 years when we have everything figured out, or what seems to be everything
Mm-hmm.
figured out, when we finally find a voice, when we have the right podcast equipment, when we have everything ready to go. Like, his point was like, start talking. Your audience will find you. You'll find your voice. You'll find your message. All that will come. But if you don't start talking, you can't start leading. And so that was kind of what led me to be like, "Hey, let's do a podcast." And
I didn't say no, which he's the ideas person of the relationship. I'm the boots on the ground, let's get it done. And so a lot of times he has these huge ideas, and I'm like, okay, but no. But with this one, as we were talking and just unpacking all that this conference really meant to him, he was like, we need to, like, he just encouraged us to start talking. Like, let's just do it. Let's do a podcast. And for some reason, I was like, yeah, we should do that. We should do a podcast. And I think at first, in my own head, I was like, wait, why are we the ones to do that? We're not the experts on this. We've been married
Not
for
yet.
what, 13, 14
Don't
months?
ask me.
When you're still counting by months, I think you're automatically
We're still
not
in infancy, technically.
exactly. Um, but I also think that leads to some people just not talking and not even having the conversations. And I think these are some of the things that we talk about. Like they're casual conversations that I may have with a coworker or with a friend about, hey, how's marriage going? How's this? But they're always behind closed doors. And so I think as we're talking through this, kind of our heart is like, you know what? God is at work in our marriage. We're not a finished product. And while we never will be, we're also like, it's very messy. And um, so if God gives you the opportunity and opens the door, then go through it. And here we are.
Yeah. So, in talking, kind of like, okay, we decided we're gonna do a podcast. What the heck are we gonna talk about? The first thing that came to mind was marriage. And I said marriage unfiltered, and then you added,
What did I add? Oh, and unfinished.
yeah, exactly.
You're
Um,
such a good listener, Austin.
so that was kind of the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Or the idea behind it is again, like while it feels like we're in the midst of the pit, and when we get some better podcasting equipment and a studio and all that, from our sponsors down the road, um, we could easily diagram some of this stuff so that we could really put some visuals to
You're gonna get a
what we're
whiteboard.
talking about. Yeah, I'm gonna
Mm.
change some people's lives. um, but like while we're like in the pit, it feels like, and it's kind of easy to, like we even went to Sunday school today, and church, and like again we're in a young married Sunday school, and every week leading up till now, and even today, I think it stuck out today since I think we both kind of had a change of mindset. But it's like, how are you guys doing? Oh, we're doing good, and everyone in that room, out of the
30
30 people,
ish people.
everyone was doing good.
Or
Um,
any request, and there's nothing wrong with what I'm about to say, but like any, hey, we need prayer for this, it's always about somebody else. And I don't know, like maybe that's really how things are,
Statistics.
like everyone needs prayer. And so I don't think anyone will be like, oh no, I'm perfect, I have it figured out. But there's just this idea almost that you need to present yourself like everything's fine. And I think even as we've been talking through this podcast and hearing Austin say, like, we are in the pit, I feel the need to be like, no, we're not. No, it's okay. Like, things are good. And with that, like, there are things to affirm, like, I love my husband. He loves me. Our marriage is stable. But there are some hard things we're having to figure out, some hard conversations that we're having to have. And I think I've been afraid of admitting that because in my head, it's just because we're newlyweds ish, but I think this will always be true is you don't want to admit when things are harder than you think they should be. Or I also think with just the number of marriages out there that don't work, part of me is like, well, if we admit that things are hard, people are going to think we're getting divorced, or people are going to think that like he doesn't love me or something's going wrong, which like that's not even true. That's not even on the table. But there's just this need of, because I'm caring of what other people think and misreading things that I'm saying, that I'm just not going to speak at all and not going to be truly honest in that way.
Yeah, and kind of back to the whole honesty thing. I mean, that's from the moment Garrett and we've talked, since this is just the intro. We just really want to kind of set the tone for podcasts to come. Um, but I mean, I told Mariah like I'm not afraid to air my dirty laundry when we feel led to. And that's not going to be 10 years from now when we have it figured out. It might be 10 days from now. Could be 10 weeks from now. Like we don't know. Um, but I mean, the most powerful person in the room is the person with nothing to hide. And so I think it was even eye opening to Moriah. Again, I come back from this conference, this crazy Californian dude with slicked back, bleach blonde hair. Holy moly, Dr. Seuss.
That's a lot.
A full arm sleeve. Every other word was a cuss word, and we talked a lot about things that made people uncomfortable. But this man challenging me and calling me a liar to the point where, like, within the first 5 minutes of that conference, in my notebook, was writing down exactly what I needed to tell my wife. Um, and again, like, we'll get into that in the future. Today's probably not the day for that. But I mean, it's messy. And I feel like, honestly, it's something that a lot of people are probably secretly dealing with. And I think, and I'll let Mariah speak to this, because even I thought it was interesting. And again, part of the reason why it's so hard is you have this idea of your spouse. Like, to me, I was like, I am broken. I am, like, beyond repair. And then my wife is over here, who her biggest struggle that day was that she probably only prayed for 5 minutes instead of 10 minutes.
It's not
And
even true.
but like, that's the feeling, and what
Yeah.
makes it hard to share. And so even when coming back from this conference and just spilling my heart, and telling her, like, this is what I need to confess to you, and this is what's going on, and this is how I've lied to you, and this is how I've not been the husband that I want to be or that you need me to be. At first, it seemed like she was kind of like, I'm here to accept your honesty now. But then it was almost like there was, again, to the point I was making, like, well, I guess she's honest about everything all the time because there was no reciprocation until today.
Yeah, well, before finishing that, I'm going to hold y'all in suspense because I want to go back to what you said about like the most powerful person in the room is the person who has nothing to hide. Yes, but even taking it deeper, like the most powerful person in the room is the person whose identity is in Christ. Therefore, they have nothing to hide and they don't worry about what other people think through them. And I think a lot of Christians, we know that. We know, like, oh, like Christ is my savior. He's my identity. Like, I don't care what the world says because Jesus. And we say that, but that doesn't, like, speaking about myself, like, my actions don't align with that. And so part of some of the conversations we've been having is like, yes, be honest and get it out there. But the reason, which I'll bring it back to what you were just saying, like the reason I can be honest about these things is because Christ is my rock. And so today, like after church, I told Austin some things that were very honest that I really had not realized I was hiding from him. And it was like that the lies of commission and omission. Like if Friday night he was like, okay, what, like, is there anything you're hiding? Which he wouldn't have asked that because that just sounds weird. But in my head, I was like, okay, this honesty right now, like this is Austin confessing things that he needs to tell me. I don't have anything like that. Like he knows I can gossip and I like to know drama and I worry about what other people think, but he knows that. And so, but then today, as we were unpacking, just this whole weekend has been lots of unpacking and processing.
Tearfully
Like
unpacking.
there's been a lot of tears. And I don't cry. Austin will tell you I didn't cry at our wedding day.
She didn't.
I really
If
did.
you were there, you know.
I did, just behind closed doors because I am not a crier. But today, as we were just unpacking some things, there was a moment in my head where I was like, okay, in my head, I know what I want to say to Austin, but I don't want to say it because I'm afraid it's going to crush him, or I'm afraid it's going to be too much, or I'm afraid he's going to get mad at me and just walk away. But then he has been leading our relationship with honesty this weekend. which allowed me to then be honest, even though I knew it was not pleasant. And even afterwards, I was like, I don't like this honesty thing. And
Well, it was even to the point where she was like, "Do you want me to be honest?" And again, probably with tears in my eyes, I was like, if not, then what's the point of being married?
yeah, and it's hard. Like, if we could rewind to that moment sitting in the car today, it would be so much easier in that moment to not be honest. Like, if I'm going to be honest with y'all right now, it would have been easier to have just kept my thoughts to myself, said, oh, like, it's fine. Yeah, I'm sorry about this, whatever. I'm sorry you're going through that. But I think because I was honest, like, it was hard and it didn't, like, it wasn't just, oh, well, thank you, Mariah, for being honest. Like, now we're good. Like, there were hard things that were said and thought through and talked through, or not talked through, just sitting in silence, taking it in. But I also know, like, again, this is the pit of, there is down the road, we will be better, we will be stronger because of the honesty that we have both chosen this weekend. And by God's grace, we'll continue to choose every day forward from now.
Yeah. So that's kind of how the honesty and the just talk about it and stuff like that from the conference this weekend have led to this culmination of doing a podcast together. um so we have no idea what future episodes hold, again, as we work through our marriage. Again, not in a way to put it out there to be, oh, look how great we are, because we're gonna fall. We're both gonna fall. One of us is gonna fall. The other is gonna keep going. Like we're gonna struggle through this, and we want people to know that like it's okay to not be good. And I think the idea of just settling for good and fine when people are like, "Oh, how are you and your husband?" "Oh, we're good." When when in reality, like, one of you's been sleeping on the couch for the past 6 months. And like, when's the last time you guys went out to dinner together and actually expressed how you felt about one another, good, bad, or ugly? And so for those people that are struggling, that do feel like they're alone, it's because there's this idea that everything has you once you get married, you just kind of sail to the end. And that's not the case. Like, our sailboat has tons of holes in it, and if we're not actively working together to plug those holes, we will slowly sink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
To play
well,
with the
Boone
voyage.
Voyage, yeah.
Yeah,
I am a nerd at heart. Austin makes fun of me for it all the
she's a
time.
Hufflepuff, if you were wondering.
I did very well in school. But I was thinking today, because at this conference, you may have to help me out with this, but they were talking through the three B's. So you have being, which is like your four B's. See, I already need
The
help.
core four.
The core four. Being, let me see if I can get it. Being is your like spiritual
Mm-hmm.
relationship with God. Body is your physical body.
Mm-hmm.
Balance is your relationship with others. Is it only marriage, or is it just?
It's relationships, but for
We've been
married
thinking about
people,
it.
well, for married people, marriage is going to be the
Okay,
predominant one.
and then oh no, oh, business. I was about to say, now that I stopped, I don't know if I could go. So business, which is like your work. So as I was thinking through the core four today, I was like, business. Like, I'm a teacher. I went to school now for what, like 7 years for teaching. I have 2 degrees in it. Have spent a lot of formal time learning how to do my business well. Body. I go to the gym almost every day. That's how we met. You take
Almost.
time, well, more than before we met. But you take time to learn how to do that. You work on it. You have your like 6 week challenges where you are really focused on it. And like being, you take time to grow in your relationship with God. But I think balance is like, well, you just get married and you're supposed to know what you're doing. And I don't think that's fair. Like, I don't think that is how it should be. And sure other people have figured it out better than we have, which maybe is why we're doing the podcast. But this is us saying, no, we do want to learn how to do this better. We are going to commit and be intentional, like you would be with your walk with God or with your physical well being. Like, we're going to be intentional because this is worth working on.
I'll, to piggyback off of what you're saying, I'll channel my inner Garrett for a second. I don't necessarily think that it's other people. I think there's a lot of liars out there. In my honest opinion, I think
Right now, you
there's,
think everyone's a liar.
and I would be probably right in saying so. There was one person that never lied. We learned about him today in church. But yeah, I would venture to say that a lot of people listening to this, there's something going on. And if you're not in the pit, you're at the peak, about to be in the pit. And so again, like that's kind of the whole point is like, I mean, watch us. If this podcast lasts 5 years, watch us go peak to pit to peak to pit to peak to pit. But hopefully that trajectory is upwards over time. And again, if this can be something that people can watch and be like, hey, I saw Austin and Moriah, um, we're doing this, we're taking these steps. This is what they did in this. Let's try that. If one couple does that from these videos, then I would consider that a victory. And if not, then there's still victory in the fact that you and I, 60 years from now, we can look back and we will have an amazing marriage because we day in and day out worked on it. Good, bad, and ugly.
Amen.
So our plan, so you know who we are. You've heard the amazing name of this podcast. You've kind of heard the heart behind why we want to do it. Maybe you have an idea of the direction we're gonna go. If you do, DM us because we'd love to know that
I was
direction.
about to say, if you do, I'm impressed because I don't know that we know that.
But now we wanted to finish with the plan, and I'll figure out a way. Again, we don't have a production crew working on this. It's going to be me. But if I can figure out a way to put the 5 C's, so you have the core 4, and then we added in the 5 C's underneath each of the 4, that we're going to work on daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and so on. So those 5 C's, confess. So confess falls under all 4 of the core 4. So like being, body, balance, and business. So like there's going to be times daily when we are going to come together and we are going to confess to one another. That's going to be confessing shortcomings, in all 4 of those major areas. It's going to be sins and wrongdoings. It's going to be lies, both said and unsaid. And it'll also be how we have failed one another in the commitments, which is a later C. So confession will be a daily thing. And then once we confess, the next C is cover, as in cover that in prayer. So we will cover our confessions of sin in prayer. We will cover one another in prayer because if we don't have prayer, then what do we have? Then we have connect. And so that's going to be ways for us to connect on a daily basis in all of those areas. So being, it could be a matter of spending 5 minutes reading Gentle and Lowly together, or reading a certain book of the Bible, praying together, ways for us to connect. Body, ways for us to physically connect, whether that's literally cuddling on the couch for 5 minutes before bed, different things like that. Then after that, we have commit. So things that we are going to commit to. So again, like, how are you going to commit to bettering yourself and being, body, balance, and business? And then create. Because it's one thing to confess, cover, connect, and commit. But if you don't create a plan to do those things, then all of those will just fall on their face. So I have a document that I made for us that has all four of the core four with all of the C's underneath, that we'll sit down weekly. If you want to join us, if there's a lot of people that ask for it, I'll find a way to put it out there so that you guys can use it as well. Um, but that's where we're starting. And I mentioned on one of our lives for some of the stuff we've been working through this weekend, we both, I think, have individual steps forward. Then we'll probably reconvene in the next couple of days, and figure out what our steps together look like. And again, as we continue to unpack this stuff together, we will share it with you guys. Because again, um, with Christ is our foundation, with Christ is our identity. Um, Honesty is literally all you can do. I think I was telling Mariah one of my big takeaways, another big takeaway. There's a lot of big takeaways this
You have a
weekend.
lot of takeaways. The entire weekend has been
I think the
takeaways.
biggest takeaway that I was sharing with someone, though, when it comes to honesty, and I think for me, it's one thing that made me. I was day one within the first 5 minutes. I wanted to. Well, I'll say I needed to talk to my wife about certain things. Then there is a moment later in that day when that need turned into want. And it's when I realized, and I've heard it before, but putting it into this frame helped. But I was like, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen, and me being completely transparent and honest with my wife, is that she turns her back on me. And yes, that sounds like it sucks. And it does. If she were to turn her back on me, it would take a while to recover, if I'm being honest. But God turned his back on Jesus on the cross so that Jesus will never turn his back on us. And so, knowing that Christ can never and will never turn his back on me, I can be honest in everything moving forward. I can be honest with you guys, because if you guys turn your back on me, I still have Christ. If my wife turns her back on me, again, I still have Christ. And so that was probably one of the biggest takeaways. And if that helps you, um, spark that conversation with your significant other, then praise the Lord. Because that's what took me to, I need to talk to my wife, to, you know what, I actually do want to talk to my wife. And there's been some very challenging conversations this weekend. But I also would venture to say in our first year of marriage, I've never felt closer to you, after the past 48 hours.
Yeah. I think going back to what we've said, I I did not realize that I won't speak for you, but like I didn't realize that I was settling for things to be okay in our marriage. And I think I had set the bar too low of, oh, we made it through our first year. We don't hate each other. Yeah, I wish he would do these things more or these things less, or we did more of this. But like, it's fine. We made it through a year. Those things can be fixed in the future. Whereas realizing, like, first off, now that we've had these conversations, some of the things that I was working through or that I wished were different are just symptoms of deeper things that we were ignoring. And now that we are in the middle of wrestling through all of that and figuring out how we can love and support each other through that, I think I realized, like I said, that we've just been missing out and that we have not seen how good it could be. And so I'm excited for knowing that putting in the hard work now, like you said, it's already like we're already closer and deeper and stronger than I think we were last week at this time. And hopefully that continues, that same trajectory continues.
It will continue.
So hopefully not as many tears, but if they
Tears are okay.
it'll be okay.
Like Garrett says, when the waterfall happens, waterfall and walk through it. Crying is as natural as pooping. Everyone does it.
I should have known we couldn't get through a podcast episode without bringing up poop.
So that's us. Maybe next time we'll give you a little bit more of our story, how we met, how we got
It's a
to
good
this
one.
point. Mariah says God writes the best stories, and
He's chosen the right time.
give us another 6 to 9 months, and our story will be even crazier than it is now. So be looking out for that on episode 2. And again, we'll probably walk through what the 5 C's underneath the core 4 look like for us after a week of incorporating them. So thanks for listening. If you made it this far, go like, comment, and subscribe.
Oh gosh.
Just kidding, but don't, but do. And then Ghost, if you're watching, we'd love for you to sponsor us along with Reebok. So
And Big Blanket Company. Like, I got a whole list.
yes, so make
CrossFit
sure
Mayhem.
you listeners go and tag those companies relentlessly. But on the real, we're excited for what God's doing in our marriage, and if putting it out there and being honest to the world helps even one couple, then I'll be content. And if not, I'll still be content because my wife and I's marriage is improving every day. So, thanks for watching. This has been Boone Voyage, and now you can say
Bon Voyage?
Yeah. I don't know.
We gotta figure out a better
outro.
We'll figure out a cheesy catchphrase.
Comment anything you want us to talk about moving forward. If you have questions, we'd love to answer them. So anything in the comments is fair game. We'd love to hear from you guys. And
it's a big promise. But yeah.
Hey, we're on it. We just spent
We're honest. We're unfiltered and unfinished.
30-something minutes talking about honest. So yeah, ask whatever questions you want. So thanks again, guys, and have a good day or night.